Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today as we take a deep dive into the new Surface Laptop Studio. Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which we live and work throughout Australia, and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people viewing this event today. We pay our respects to elders both past, present and emerging, and recognise and celebrate their ongoing cultures and continuing connection to the land, waters and community. Our respect also extends to all First Nation and Indigenous peoples, as well as their ancestral lands. We're grateful to those who have created pathways for us to live with the many benefits we experience today. So welcome to the first of 3 webinars where we will dive into some of the features of the new Surface Laptop Studio. Next week, we'll focus more on power users, and we'll have a couple of our Azure developer leads who've been playing with the Surface Laptop Studio. And in the final week, we'll have a bit more of a focus on health and other industry use cases. Throughout these sessions, we'll bring to life why Surface and why the Surface Laptop Studio. Don't forget to register for the follow-up sessions. I'm Michael Townsend. I'm the Surface Product Manager for Australia and New Zealand, and I'll be talking to you about hybrid work and some great Microsoft research and insights we released just this month from the annual Work Trend Index. Today, I'll also be joined by Peter Lewis, who is our Surface engineer, and he'll take us through the performance, GPU, CPU of the new Surface Laptop Studio. We'll be joined by Matthew and Brett Gilbertson, our productivity and collaboration experts from Tablet PC, who will walk you through some of the demos and showcase some capabilities of this device. And now just a little bit of housekeeping. This is a webinar, but via the standard Teams meeting, as we wanted to keep it a bit interactive and a little bit more intimate for our early adopters of Surface Laptop Studio. We've got a mix of partners, customers, and Microsoft specialists as well. So please ask questions in the chat throughout, and we've left some time at the end for any open questions, and you can come off mute and show your face then as well. We want to hear your thoughts, so please pop those questions in and make sure you stick around for that. Also, just stay on mute throughout the call, be respectful to your fellow attendees, and feel free to have your camera on if you like. This session will be recorded and available on demand, but we will remove names and faces before the webinar becomes available, but just be mindful of that. It is being recorded. So before we get into the product stuff, I wanted to talk to you about how we're going to make this hybrid work thing work. So we're in a bit of an awkward phase. I've been going into the office a couple of days a week, but it's still pretty empty. You can see us presenters on the call, we're at home. And when I do go in the office, half my team who said they would come, stand me up. We had a team offsite a couple of weeks ago, and I was one of the few remote workers, and that was because my son had COVID and I was isolating. It was tough not being there. I missed out on meeting a lot of people that I'd only seen on a screen as well. I'm sure we've all got similar experiences. We're all working through how we can make hybrid work work. But at Microsoft, we're looking closely at the data to understand what trends are emerging. Recently, we released our 2nd annual Work Trend Index, which surveyed over 31,000 people in 31 countries, uncovering trillions of labour productivity signals on Microsoft M365. So things, meetings, Teams usage, employee well-being, and LinkedIn, job postings, movements, locations. This also included 1,000 Australian and 1,000 New Zealand respondents. If you think about who might have the best data set and best insights, we've got it. This report is also our 2nd year into it. On a global scale, employees continue to reevaluate their worth it equation. You know, as people experience more of remote working and flexible work, the equation is starting to shift back on the self or yourself. There's no going back. Companies must meet employees in the middle, and this big shift leaves us with the question, how do we make hybrid work work? These are the key 5 trends or findings from the latest report. So number 1, employees are trying to figure out if it's all worth it. and they're prioritizing their own health and well-being over work, and more than they did before the pandemic. Managers are feeling wedged, potentially between senior leadership and pushing them to, senior leadership pushing people to get back into those empty offices, and employees that aren't ready, are getting used to remote working, or just don't want to come back. Number 3, going into the office needs to be worth it. Why spend an hour traveling to work just to sit on a video conference? I made that decision just today. I have more control at home than the office for some things, like doing a webinar. Number 4, flexible doesn't mean always on. So digital exhaustion is a real problem. And one stat that really stood out to me was that meetings have increased 252% since February 2020. I can feel that. And rebuilding social capital. What does that even mean? Basically it's making friends, making networks. Again, my personal experience is that I joined Microsoft in May 2020, in the middle of the big first lockdown, and I didn't meet my team for months. And it definitely has been much harder to build networks. Even in an organization like Microsoft, that is one of the best at hybrid work and was doing it long before I joined, it definitely is tough. So what can we do about this? Well, here's a summary of the recommendations. I won't go through these now, but I'd love to know the challenges you're facing in your organization, in your teams. Have a look at the poll that's going to pop up, and feel free to comment in the chat too. I think we're all feeling this, and would love to know your thoughts. And really, the main recommendation I have here is to download the full report. It's an excellent report, and I'm sure all the same themes are affecting your organizations as well. Also, I won't pretend we have all the solutions. There's organizational change, culture, and even change management that's needed, but we definitely can help in some areas to help keep your employees connected, productive, secure, and help with collaboration. And this is where PCs and devices come in. We've seen from other research that devices are more important than ever. They're your portal into the workplace, your productivity and collaboration machine. And this is where the guys from Collab Tech will give us a bit more insights into how to stay productive and some demos later on. Hybrid work has driven huge device refreshes as organizations find they need more power and better audio and video. Our end users not only need, but are demanding better devices to support hybrid and remote working. So how does this all relate? Surface is about innovation and being the best productivity and collaboration device around. The first Surface back in 2012 kicked off the 2-in-1 design, and the latest Pro 8 is the best version of it so far. In 2015, we introduced the Book with its amazing hinge, detachable screen, and solid base keyboard with NVIDIA graphics options. And then the Studio took it big for a premium desktop, executives, front of house, design, architecture, and even kiosk applications. In 2017, you'd think a laptop isn't that innovative, but we really focused on ultra slim portability, crisp displays, and we're ahead of the pandemic when it came to great microphones and webcams. With every iteration, we've broken new ground in design, power, and flexibility. And from the consumer-focused devices we began with to devices meeting the needs of large enterprises and government businesses today. The Surface story is about creating the best experience possible, and we're continuing that with the Surface Laptop Studio. So you can kind of see that's where we got the name. It's a Surface, it's a laptop, and it's a studio with this new stage mode. Plus, it's a tablet. And so, again, the tablet PC guys will take us through some of these modes. But personally, it's my favorite device. It's my daily driver. I have the luxury of being able to choose from any devices, and you can see some of them here in the background. I flip between the laptop, the Book, and the Pro 8, but I just keep coming back to the Laptop Studio. For me, it's the right size. It's a 14.4-inch display. It's a beautiful screen running at 120 hertz, And most of all, it's the power. It doesn't sweat the massive Excel files, the database pools, plus the PowerPoint, plus the video conferencing. It just doesn't tick over when I'm looking at that performance meter. Please ask us questions throughout the chat and throughout the webinar. Myself and other Surface specialists will be answering those. On that note, I'm going to hand to our resident Surface engineer, Peter, who'll be running through the power, performance, and GPU capabilities of this device. Peter, take it away.
All right, taking control. Thanks, Mike. As he mentioned, I'm Peter Lewis. I'm from Surface Engineering. I'm here to talk to you a bit about the power and performance of our new device. So when we set out to create this laptop studio, we really challenged ourselves to create the most versatile device, but we wanted it to have unparalleled performance. And indeed, this is the most powerful device in the Surface lineup today. When we started designing the studio, we wanted to take the best features of Book and Pro and the Surface Studio and roll them into this one single flexible device, but ensure that it had the power to support the heavy workloads that are required from today's power users. A central component to this, of course, is the introduction of the 11th gen Intel Core i5 and i7 H-class processors. The H-class processors are able to throttle up to 64 watts and can power through the most complex workloads. It's a step up from the U-class processor that we use in our other models, which usually max out about 15 watts, but the U-class has better portability and maximum battery life. But it may not meet the performance requirements of today's power users. Now with the added performance you just saw there, and you can see on the screen, well, it's just gone, but you can see in that video, with the performance comes extra heat. And to mitigate that, we've really optimized the heat dissipation on this device by including dual actively controlled fans. And that, coupled with Dynamic Boost 2.0 technology, it really helps balance out the power between the CPU and the GPU and helps the machine throttle up and effortlessly deal with the heavier workloads, and really creates a truly seamless user experience that Michael mentioned before. So I'll just go to the next slide. To support that seamless experience, the Studio comes with up to 32 gig of RAM and a 2 terabyte removable SSD. I'm certainly on the 32 gig RAM device at the minute, and yeah, it doesn't break a sweat when you're doing anything. We also chose the industry-leading NVIDIA RTX A2000 graphics card because it offers professional graphics rendering and AI capabilities that are needed by the demanding professional workflows. These include use cases such as manufacturing and product design, media and entertainment modeling, animation and rendering, architecture, engineering and construction design. But I'll speak a little bit more about that graphics card shortly. And to help power all of this, we've included a 56 watt-hour battery that can provide up to 19 hours on the i5 and 17 hours on the i7. However, it really should be noted that these are benchmarking test metrics, and the typical usage of this device is probably going to be a little bit higher and require a little bit more power to throttle up and do those power workloads. So similar to driving a car, if you put your foot down on the accelerator constantly, you're going to use more fuel as you go through. So just something to be mindful of. Another thing, if you're like me, this is docked most of the time. I do use it to go to the office, etc. But when it is docked, it has smart charging on it, so it will increase the longevity of the battery life. So it discharges to 80%, and it'll keep that battery in the sweet spot. And then when you need the battery, it's available, but it is equipped with smart charging. To the next slide. As mentioned earlier, we chose the RTX A2000 to meet the demanding user needs around the graphically intensive business critical software suites like Adobe, etc. So, and Adobe Premiere Pro, Autodesk and AutoCAD, and a lot more. In fact, later on there's a slide that speaks to the ISVs that we've tested against. This RTX has 80 tensor cores for faster AI processing, 20 ray tracing cores for ultra-fast 3D rendering, and over 2,500 CUDA cores that have helped it become an industry-leading GPU. And it is the most highly certified and extensively tested graphics card that's for these professional applications. Now, if you're like me, there are many power users out there. I don't think many of us work on a single screen. I certainly don't. I have, in fact, I've got 3 screens looking at me right now. So this particular device can support 2 4K monitors at 60 Hertz, or 1 4K monitor at 120 Hertz. Or if you need to go up to higher displays, you can have 4 displays at lower resolutions. However, when you do take it on the go, this is hybrid work. We do need to move and go into the office, etc. If you're on the go, you'll be working on our true to life color and contrast with our factory calibrated 14.4-inch pixel sense touchscreen display that can dynamically shift up to 120 Hertz refresh rate as required. And that coupled with our class-leading touchscreen and haptic inking with the Surface Pen. There you go. So it was docked to the bottom. I had to just pull it out. It creates a truly immersive experience for you as a user. I won't spend long on this slide. As I mentioned before, it's ISV certified and extensively tested. I've listed some of the software there, but there's a link at the bottom of the page there, which we'll put in the chat, that has a list of the current ISV tested and certified apps. And lastly, though this is not a performance piece, I did want to call out that when we created the device, we not only wanted to create a device that would meet your needs as a power user, but provide a great long-term investment. So we designed the Laptop Studio to be the most repairable device possible with many replaceable components. Those sorts of components are the storage SSD, the display assembly, the keyboard and touchpad, all the USB and audio, all the ports on the side, include the battery assembly, which is something that's new for these products, as well as some of the peripheral parts like feet and things like that. Now, it should note that all of these parts should be serviced by a skilled technician following the Microsoft service guidance. So with that, I'll throw to Brett from Tablet PC, and he'll discuss a little bit more around hybrid work and how our Laptop Studio can support it.
And I'll in turn throw to Matt, who will unmute himself, and he'll kick off. Yeah.
Good call. Thank you very much. Wouldn't be a Teams meeting without someone being on mute to start talking, would it? Yeah. Let's talk about the Surface Studio just from a workflow perspective, because whether we were in an office or hybrid, and by the way, I love how the hybrid conversation has changed. We now think about hybrid as going into the office rather than going home to work, right? So, but our workflow actually hasn't changed. And so there's 3 major components in our workflow that Brett and I talk about at Tablet PC. So we have thoughts and ideas, we have our planning phase, and we have the building or the construction phase of what we do at work. And we love to apply tools to all of those. Now, traditionally, we're using different tools for each of these phases of our workflow. And this is why we want to talk about this before we show you demos, is because the Surface Studio, Surface Laptop Studio, is able to be deployed and help us in all 3 phases of our workflow, unlike many of the tools we're used to using. So, you know, when we think about a workflow, which of these things comes first for you in the flow? Is it the creating, the building and the doing, or is it the thinking and the planning? Well, we would say that the thinking and the planning really matters. And in fact, if you build something without much thinking and planning, we're pretty confident it will turn out like one of Homer's efforts here. Yes, I remember the early series of The Simpsons, and I think they're the best. That's how old I am. But this is what happens when people deploy tools without planning and thinking. And so we've just heard about the wonderful power and horsepower of the Surface Laptop Studio. But I want you to think about some more nuanced ways that we could apply that power, because the thinking and creative work that we do in an office is actually really messy. And it's probably this messy thinking is what we've suffered most at when it comes to hybrid work. We still need this ideation in our workflow. Yeah. Whiteboarding, planning, drawing, sketching, taking notes on paper. These are things we're still doing, but we've lost the ability to do them with others potentially. We've got a question for you to think about when you consider devices. Does your chosen technology tool allow you to participate in low formality creative discussions? Now, what's low formality about? Well, we learnt this term from Professor Gordon Sanson, and his work pointed to us around two different ways that we think when it comes to our workflow as humans. We have low formality or unstructured thinking, and these are typically that whiteboard session, the notes you take in meetings, all of the pen-based thinking, the chats that we're having, the ideas that bounce off each other. And then he talked about highly structured or high formality thinking, right? Which is the typing that you do and the structuring that you do around the building part of our workflow. Yeah. So the question is pretty simple. Does your device allow you to use multimodal input and tools? If it doesn't, it may as well be a typewriter. For more than 20 years, we've had the ability to apply keyboard, mouse, but also microphones, cameras, trackpads, speakers, and digital ink to our devices. We see an alarmingly low usage of these tools, though, and this is why we fall in love with devices like the Surface Studio laptop so quickly, because they allow us to bring all of these things together into one device. And that leads me just to a point that we want to talk about as Brett's prepping for demos right now. Are you a horsepower guy, or are you a handling guy, or person, I should say? All right. I'm a bit of there's no substitute for cubic inch person, but you know what? On the track, you need to be able to get in and out of corners, and so it's beautiful to have this sort of horsepower, but really it's the cornering that gets me to the finish line of my building or my race quickly. And again, this is where the Surface Laptop Studio stands out, because it gives us an ability to apply horsepower into getting in and out of corners. And on that point, I'm going to hand over to Brett to talk about the modes of the studio, the Surface Laptop Studio, and some demos as to how we can apply multimodal work and thinking to our workflow.
Cool, Matt. Thank you. I'll take over. Yeah.
So Brett, we were commenting on your beautiful looking studio setup here. You've done a lot of YouTube unboxings before. You've had this device for about a month now. What are your initial impressions?
Yeah, I mean, Michael, I'm a big Surface Pro 8 fan, and that's my preference. But I think that this is a really unique piece of hardware, and I love the new design. I think I also loved the Surface Book, the previous model, but I think with this model, it just makes these modes that we're going to go through just even more accessible and easy to reach for people who are just sort of discovering this low formality environment that we're talking about here. And I think that anything that can do that, anything that can make it easier for people to reach out, grab that pen, and work like we're working here.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said before, we had an offsite the other day, and even though we're better at it than most, you've really got to force those tools where you can interact and get the person in and outside of the room engaged. So it's good to see the whiteboard here.
Yeah, I think it's got huge potential, and so I'm going to sort of walk through the different modes of the device. Just sort of taken some photos and written up some points here, but certainly the mode that I'm going to actually start using now, I don't know if you can still see that when I fold it down here with my pen, this creative mode, the tablet mode. You're seeing us using this right now, and Matt and I created this presentation, as you can see here in whiteboard. Matt, you might want to scribble somewhere on this just so that they can see that Matt's in Queensland, I'm here in Melbourne. Michael's there in Sydney. We created this together using this tool, so that the geographical barriers that we had are no longer an issue. In fact, for us, they haven't been for years, even before pandemic, because we can actually work on this in this sort of low formality environment together. So things like, you know, taking meeting notes, brainstorms, designing wireframes for UIs, things like that, even the Kanban and the planner board that we're used to having in the office, these can all be done on a digital canvas like we're using here with the Microsoft Whiteboard. But there's a few other apps that I wanted to really highlight in this particular mode that I love using on the Surface Laptop Studio. Shaper 3D is one of the apps that I'm going to have a quick look at. The Concepts app, the little tools and the Surface Laptop Studio, I drew that in the Concepts app, and I'm certainly no artist, but you'll see how I did that in a second. And I'll do a quick demonstration on Bluebeam Review as well, which I wouldn't really put into the category of a tablet or a creative sort of app in this way, but we're going to do it this way just so that you can see that demonstrated anyway. So let me jump across. I might start off with Concepts, which here's my little drawing of the Surface Laptop Studio. Now, I clearly cheated on this. So you can see that I've actually got the picture there that I've traced over the top of. But this is a brilliant app. If you haven't ever tried it on a Surface device, go and get it. It's from the Microsoft Store. Concepts, it's free to start and use. I paid for the Pro version because I think it's unreal. But you know, I can draw with the pen on this Surface Laptop Studio. And I've actually got haptic feedback in this app here. So when I'm drawing, I'm actually feeling the texture of the virtual paper through the tip of the pen, and that's really amazing to use. And if you wanted to really test out the capabilities of that new 120 hertz screen and the new pen with its lower activation force, it's much faster response times, it's almost imperceptible, this is the app to try it out in, because it's like what I'm seeing here. You won't see that across Teams, but what I'm seeing here is really incredible. Feels just like pen and paper. And in here we have other tools like, for example, my ruler that I use to create those straight lines there. So I can just draw something straight, or I could put a shape on and draw around it, layers, etc. You might think of this as a typical sort of digital artist tool, but it's not. It's for people like you and me who just need to create things visually, to think about things visually, to map out a quick plan, or you know, even a flow chart or something like that. A really amazing application. Another one of my favorites to demonstrate is this one that I've just switched over to here, which is Shaper 3D, an incredible application that just late last year came into the Microsoft Store, started out its life as an iPad application and an Apple Pencil application. Now it's on Windows, and they've really optimized it for the laptop mode, or the docked mode that we're going to talk about as well. The workstation mode works great with keyboard and mouse, but it still works incredibly well with the Surface Pen. So I'm just going to tap on this and just go and create a quick sketch here. I have to think about what I'm going to do. I'll make just a bit of a square, and I'll turn this into a three-dimensional object real quick. So it works, like I said, incredibly well. It differentiates between touch and pen input, and I could do things like extrude the shape here. I might just put a little bit of a chamfer on one of the edges here, or a fillet there, and I might even just draw a circle on the top and extrude the circle through. Now, I'm a bit of a hobby 3D printer person here, so this stuff, I'm used to the idea of 3D modeling and design. Most of the tools on Windows previously that I've used, they're pretty clunky with the pen. They don't really work. And but this tool, this works incredibly well with the Surface Pen. And I'm just going to do another little extrusion here before I get too carried away with my 3D design, just so that you can see the capabilities of this. And clearly, the hardware is built for this sort of application. It renders these sorts of things incredibly fast and well. And it's a real joy to work with this type of application. So that's Shaper 3D. And the other workflow and application that I mentioned here was one called Bluebeam Review. Now, anybody who's worked in the architecture, engineering, construction sort of field, I think probably 95% of people know about Bluebeam Review. It's a PDF editing application that has been around for a long time. Started out its life in the NASA Jet Propulsion Labs in Pasadena, California. It's become a bit of a standard for organizations doing takeoff of plans on PDF files, and also quality control. And just to demonstrate again how well that all of that horsepower works on the Surface Laptop Studio, I'll just grab all of these PDFs how many have I got here? 19 different PDFs, and I will attempt, not working for me right now. Can I do it with touch? There we go. I'll do it with touch to open all of those 19 PDFs at once. So there was a 3D PDF in there as well, which I didn't really want, but so I've got a plan. Did you see how quickly that detailed plan spun up there? And I've got something that I can instantly work on. Moving in and out of these sorts of complex plans and documents has typically been a bit of a task. That rendering has been a bit of a task that computers struggle with. This thing just doesn't even miss a beat. And I don't even think the fans are on this just yet. So I've thrown a huge workload at it, but it's done incredibly well. Now this application, you know, I could use it for, as I mentioned, quality control, those sorts of workflows. I might just grab a, if I can remember, I think it's this one here, a cloud tool, and just draw a cloud around it. I could add an arrow here and do this kind of markup on the fly. Perhaps, you know, one of the reasons I wanted to show you Bluebeam in this particular mode is I might be sitting opposite the client. And, you know, when I'm in the office, I'm going to be using the keyboard and the mouse and the two screens with this application. But when I'm sitting there with the client, I can have this and we can be having a discussion over this or across a Teams call, and we can be doing the markup together in real time, make the comments and notes about it. So I think that that's a really, a few quick, really interesting workflows that we can use that creative tablet mode for. So
Brett, I just want to just pause there, right? Because I think that that's a really important point. So in the chat, right, and this is something, you know, every discussion that I've had about the Surface Studio with people already, right, is people, they go, oh, I bet it's heavy, right? And I always like to say, heavy compared to what? Right, so is it heavy compared to your desktop that's at your desk? No, it's not, right? And from an actual weight perspective, it's lighter than the Surface Book, as Michael rightly points out. But the key point about this device is that the workflow you've just demonstrated, Brett, is an architect going to site and having a conversation with the builder and marking up a plan in front of the object. Yep. Whereas alternatively, they would be taking pen and paper, right, and a bag full of papers, by the way, to site, yep, writing up notes, and then going back to an office and having to post-process all of that information they've done.
And the flip of that too is that it's often a laptop, you know, a big heavy workstation laptop in that bag, and an iPad or something like that as well. So there's a whole kit of devices that go with you, and that, you know, there's all the compromises that come with the different software suites on all of those. Whereas this, I've got the one device that can go to a site office, that can go out on site, that can go back into the office or at the home office as well.
Just a little bit more to that. We have been talking about, you know, transitions from, especially people who really did like the book form factor. It's a little bit different. It's not detachable. So yeah, there is going to be a weight difference if you're just thinking tablet. But, you know, especially if it's someone coming from the Book 3 13-inch, the Pro 8's a really viable alternative now. Like, we're going from a 10th gen to an 11th gen. The power on it is impressive, and you know, you get even lighter, and you get the 2-in-1. If you still really like the solid keyboard, you know, the Laptop Studio is kind of the all-in-one solution. But again, there's other options there from Bridge. If you really want to stick with the Pro 8, you can get Bridge keyboards with a solid base and keep that detachable option as well.
Yeah, awesome.
Typically, from a customer perspective, weight conversations are had with people that don't understand the power of the device and what it can do for their workflow. It's the same with color, right? I don't like the color. Well, yeah, are we talking about what actually helps us to get work done here, or are we talking about, you know, peripheries that actually are probably less important than we might think?
Yeah. So so thinking about this particular mode that I'm in now, the presentation mode, where we're going to perhaps read some content, maybe read an article on the web, using the Edge browser and the great reading mode. We might be watching something, reviewing something, maybe making a few quick notes. Could even be doing a one-to-one presentation. So that Bluebeam example where we're looking at the plans with the customer, it could be a sitting side-by-side scenario. But the beauty of this mode is that it brings the content up to you, gets the keyboard out of the way, and really balances that out and gives it, you know, makes things really accessible to you. So one of the apps that I haven't even talked about, I can't believe wasn't on our list, was OneNote. You know, from the tablet perspective, we love demonstrating OneNote, but the OneNote web clipper there is an example. The example that I just wanted to show you today was in the Edge browser. This could be in Chrome as well, because the Edge is built on the Chromium rendering engine. But I just wanted to point out that there's this incredible thing here available on Windows now, which is called a PWA. So if you look at my taskbar here in, hopefully you can see that, yeah, in the Edge browser, sorry, not the taskbar, what do we call this? The address bar. There's this little button just here that actually allows me to go ahead and install YouTube as an app. It's called a progressive web app, or a PWA. There are hundreds of applications that are now available as PWA. So you might think, oh, it's not a real app. Well, let's have a look at it. Because it came through the web browser, most of the apps that are on your phone and through the app stores on your phone are PWAs. In fact, in the background, we just don't know about it. I've now installed this as a PWA. So I'm looking at YouTube. Imagine if I was signed in, I'd have all my recommendations, my channels, all of that sort of stuff there. Watching videos with touch, I can double tap to go forward, double tap to go back, all of those sorts of things that you'd expect in a typical tablet app, full screen. But I don't have the whole browser interface cluttering up the environment. Now, if YouTube wanted to, they could do things like make downloads available, offline viewing, all of those sorts of things through the PWA interface. And there are dozens of applications, hundreds in fact, of applications that do exactly that. So if an application is not available in the Microsoft Store, like YouTube, there's a good possibility that you can still install it through either Chrome or Microsoft Edge with a PWA. And that's a great application for this sort of viewing or watching, presenting mode of the Surface Laptop Studio. Now, obviously,
I mean, it's essentially a do-it-yourself kind of kiosk in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. Just again, it takes the keyboard out of the way. You've still got that great haptic feedback, massive trackpad on the device that you can use, or you can use the touchscreen because it's much more accessible because it's closer. You can use the pen to navigate as well. But yeah, it changes the way we interact with it, which I really love about this mode. Laptop mode. I don't need to explain laptop mode to people. You know how to use the keyboard and mouse, and the Surface Laptop Studio, as Michael mentioned, has that great, physical hard keyboard. It's world class, and it's one of the best. Thinking about the laptop scenario and taking it that step further, we've got the workstation mode as well, where we do have the multi-monitor capabilities that Pete was talking about earlier. 2 4K screens at 60 Hertz through the Surface docking station, or a USB or Thunderbolt 4 docking station, because we have Thunderbolt 4 USB-C ports on the side of this device. We could do other things like run external GPUs and all sorts of things through that port. When we're in the office, I'm running my Outlook inbox over here and my calendar over there on a separate desktop with my OneNote page, my research, all of those sorts of things, and those support. Those scenarios are all supported by this one device. So we can go from a workstation to a tablet in front of a customer doing a quick 3D design in shape of 3D. So we think it's a pretty incredible device, and the workflows that it offers and supports are amazing. Matt, I'll get you to just unmute again.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that leads us right to how do we successfully use tools, right? Or how do we find out how we can successfully use tools? I was in a Twitter conversation just this week where a user experience designer came out and made some comments around, the tool has to be fit for purpose. He used a hammer as an example, right? And he said, we know that this is the business end of the hammer and this is the end you hold, and the use of tools needs to be that simple, was his point. And this sort of triggers me, as I'm actually a carpenter. My background's in construction, and I go, you know what? There's actually a way to hold a hammer, and there's a way to use it. And if you picked up a hammer for the first time, I'm pretty confident that I could hit a nail in better than you could, because the way you use a hammer, the skill you have using it matters. Yeah, and this is the same for every tool. And so really, this comes down to how are you going to learn to apply these tools to their full capability. Yeah. And that's what our YouTube channel exists for. That's what we exist for at Tablet PC. And that's why we love to be a part of these sorts of webinars where we deep dive into these devices and how they can be used, because it's all well and good to know what they're capable of, but it's another thing entirely to be able to use them effectively to improve your workflow. And just to finish off on that point, if I just jump back to this messy work image that we had here earlier.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, Matt. I took over.
Oh, cool. Sorry.
I was trying to get us to the question thing. I thought you were finishing up on that visual.
I was going to, and then I hijacked it. Sorry, Mike.
I'll just reshare it. Yep.
Yep.
Awesome. You sharing, Matt?
Yeah. You go for it, Brett. Please just move up to that creativity, that thinking piece. Just so you can grab the whole lot together, right?
Yep.
What we know, right? So we talked about the Surface Laptop Studio as a wonderfully powerful device. And hopefully what we've been able to also demonstrate to you is that it's got great handling capabilities. Yep. So it is that Aston Martin from a handling perspective, because we can use pen, touch, keyboard, mouse, trackpad, all of these things together to get work done. And what we know, and we've sort of alluded to it, that if we can consolidate people's devices, instead of carrying 3 or 4, if we can get you down to 2 devices, plus if we can teach you how to use multimodal computing, that's to embrace digital pen, video, voice, etc., we know that we can give you back a minimum of 8 hours per person per week each. So these sorts of devices become investments in people's well-being, yeah, their workflow, and we get better. One of the things in the trends, right? People, we don't know how to get social capital anymore because we're so remote. But it's actually in this massive creative thinking that we can bring that social capital back. Being, you know, as Brett mentioned, we whiteboard tons of stuff every day. We're on a whiteboard together, ideating a thought or something we've got to work together on, and that brings us together. You know, from a thinking perspective, not just here's an email to you, please read this and misinterpret it and respond. So yeah, that's our message to you. Embrace the power of these devices, but embrace their handling capability and reach out to Microsoft and to us to help you take full advantage of that and put a customized training program in place to make sure that your customers and yourselves get the benefits of these investments. Over to you, Michael.
Thanks.
So thank you for joining the webinar today. We've got questions. We've got a little bit of time. We've probably spoke for a little bit longer than we thought we would, but please come off mute, put your hand up so we can try and answer you in order. We've tried answering questions as we go throughout, but please, this is I guess a fairly intimate audience of partners, Microsoft specialists, and customers as well. So please, we can stay on for a few more minutes. And thanks again for your time. I would love you to also don't forget about our follow-up sessions, and we'll post links to those as well in the chat. But again, thanks for your time, and yeah, please ask us some questions. Come off mute, show us your face.
Hey, I've got a question for if no one's going to, Pete, you know, because you're in the Surface engineering team. So just off the cuff, question without notice. You've seen the book, you've seen the laptop, you've seen the Pro 8. What is it about this? What's the number one thing you love about the studio laptop studio, I should say?
Well, there's the number one thing is definitely the performance for me. As you said before, or as it was said before, it just doesn't break a sweat when you're doing things. I'm not necessarily a power user in terms of using CAD or video editing and etc. But I am, and sorry to say this, but I am a person that has more than 5 tabs open, probably 10 times more than 5 tabs open. So, you know, I can handle that stress level. I will manage it. But it just doesn't break a sweat. I've even gone to the extent of really trying to push this around, and I've had a video conference call running. I've had Google 3D Earth running in the background. I've even put Subnautica on from Xbox Game Pass, and when Subnautica went on, the fan started. I heard it then. But that's really the only time I've ever heard the fan spin up on this device. And that being said, you know, I've had a Book 3, a 13-inch Book 3 before this, and loved that form factor as well. You know, one of the things that I really like about this is it's a simple little thing, but being in a laptop form factor, you do have the ability to reposition the camera as you need to for a video conferencing call. You know, it's a simple little thing, but if you're on if you're on a Pro, you've got that that stand, and I often do find if I'm using it in front of me here, I'll position it just that little bit steeper, or have to then put my chair up so that I'm
my wife, Peter, she has a method of doing this, which is to put a book under the kickstand and it tilts to the surface. So, but yeah, that's a really good point. I just wanted to mention Ruben's comment in the chat as well, just plugging the sustainability of the device. So 30% reduction in emissions to create the Surface Laptop Studio versus the Book 3 13-inch. So that's a pretty huge gain when we're mass producing these devices. That's massive. And not only that, but thinking like long term in the impact of this device being so serviceable as a form factor, that is a huge benefit from a sustainability perspective. Yeah, because we, you know, in Matt and I's experience, we see devices that are 5 to 10 years old so commonly. In fact, on YouTube, we get people all the time saying to us, I'm still using my Surface Pro 2, and where can I get accessories for it or something like that. So these devices have a long life cycle, and that serviceability really supports that.
Yeah, particularly the battery. You know, a battery is a consumable item. It's something that will degrade over time. So having that be a user serviceable part, or not a user service, but a serviceable item, means that you can really push the device in terms of longevity.
Yep.
And yeah, and the other part that I really do like, I like the screen. I like the crystal clarity that you get on this particular display. And in fact, I find myself using it more often than my other monitors, which are a bigger form factor. But yeah, I do most of my work on this small display. So what it is about it that I like so much, I'm not sure, but I do find myself using it more and more.
Yeah, it's very compelling. It's a nice display. It's incredible.
You said the little touches before, it jogged my memory that the pen sits under here and charges, and it's a solid magnet. So like this goes in your bag. I'm not afraid it's gonna slide off and get lost. I mean, it's the number one reason people stop using the pen, because they lose it quite early and they're ashamed to ask for a replacement from their boss. But that's massive innovation. Charges there, easily accessible, and hard to lose. So
question is, what will the airports do with their collection of pens at the X-ray machine, with their collection of Surface pens from people who lose them on the X-ray machine, right? So it won't happen anymore, is what you're saying, Mike.
Yeah. You saw, actually, that is a very strong magnet, because when I was doing my presentation, you saw the whole device flick up as I was trying to get the pen off. So yeah, it's good fun. And the other thing, that haptic feedback, it's very interesting, because I never knew how much I enjoyed it, because I've gone from the non-haptic device to haptic, and you know, you don't notice it as you're using it, but it really, when you do the comparison between the two, you really can feel the difference, and it does feel immersive is really the only word that I would use for it. It feels natural, you know. So
as I was creating some of those images for our whiteboard last night, it really struck me in that Concepts app, because they seem to have it dialed right up, and each app can target those haptics differently. Some of them don't have haptic support, but a lot of them do. And it was almost kind of like, oh, wow, that just feels like drawing on paper. And it was kind of jarring for me, because I'm so used to the slippery feel of pen on glass. So it's very interesting how that gives texture to the feel of the pen.
Yeah, you will see more and more uses in applications coming up. That API is available for anyone to access from any software vendor, any ISV, and our Office team is targeted to bake it into all of the applications. In fact, OneNote is coming shortly, so expect to see that very soon.
Yeah,
to that.
just we're at time. I just want to thank everyone for attending today. We will stay on for a few more minutes if you've got questions. But again, thank you for your time, and please register for the follow-up sessions where we'll go into a little bit more detail in developers and power users next week.